frid och shalom. Klockan är 20:30 just nu och det pågår väldigt tungt artilleri och bombardemang över Gaza just nu. Egypten har öppnat så att civilbefolkningen kan ta sig in i Egypten. Och det är väl vad Israel väntade på, för annars om man går in nu så kommer det att bli så mycket människoliv till spillo så FN och alla länder, de kommer att reagera givetvis då. Och då kanske man inte har fördel av alla vad man tycker nu då. Och sen är det ett väldigt upplopp och oro i de muslimska länderna, och Jordanien har stängt sin gräns just nu för att inte muslimvärlden ska trycka på och in där. Syrien har deras 2 största flygplatser, där har Israel bombat sönder så för att förhindra. Iran då för att transportera in vapen då till Hamas. Man kommer att gå in troligen snart då man har fått ut så mycket som möjligt av befolkningen i Gaza. Man håller just nu på så att säga att förbereda sig. Vi blir nog uppdatering då imorgon bitti. Gud välsigna er alla. Amen.
Forces create militarized zones as they finish off the final battles on the borders with the Gaza Strip. Hello and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Israeli-Palestinian war. And in the latest reports we see that the Israeli forces have managed to completely stop all of the fights in between Gaza and the Israeli army positions, and as such they have been able to create a militarized zone which covers the areas shown in this picture here, where essentially there's nothing except Israeli military present in these areas. They have fully evacuated all civilians from these areas and are in these areas preparing and building up their forces for the upcoming ground offensive. The reason why this ground offensive has not taken place yet, despite the Israelis announcing it, is because they are still bombarding the Gaza positions of Hamas. They are also completely destroying all of Gaza, both with their airstrikes, but also with their complete blockade of Gaza, where they are blockading Gaza from all humanitarian needs, including water, food, medicine, all of this to prevent weapons and to discourage the Hamas fighters from continuing the war. In this relation, they've also said that they will continue this blockade until the Palestinians release all of the hostages that were taken in the first day of fighting. The current bombardment of Gaza is extremely heavy, with airstrikes and incendiary munitions constantly hitting the positions across all of Gaza, both civilian and military positions, as the city itself is so close to each other that it is hard to hit one without hitting the other, whether or not Hamas uses these public positions as military bases. So far there's been hit multiple apartment buildings, about 2,000 houses have been destroyed. We see the complete destruction with these airstrikes and the incendiary munitions hitting these different areas within Gaza. And all of this combined show the outcome with these pictures taken after the airstrikes in these locations. So essentially there are a few focus points across Gaza where the Israelis are heavily bombarding until there's nothing left. This has resulted in over 350,000 displaced civilians, as they have nowhere to go, with all of the crossings closed, both between Gaza and the Israeli territories, as well as between Gaza and Egypt. This crossing here by Rafah had been closed since the start of the war. It has opened slightly at some point, then the Israeli airstrikes started by the checkpoint, and then we now see again that it has been opened, as the Egyptians have announced that they are allowing the civilians to escape through this checkpoint. So according to the latest news, this checkpoint is open and Palestinian refugees are flooding into Egypt. This is likely why the Israeli ground offensive hasn't started yet either, because there's a lot of Palestinian civilians within Gaza, over 2 million, If these civilians stay in Gaza while the Israelis launch their ground offensive, it would end up with such a severe amount of casualties that not even Israel would be able to cope with the utter destruction that there would happen within Gaza and the Palestinian civilians. It would turn essentially the whole world against them. So they're waiting until the Palestinians escape across the border to Egypt so that they're able to launch a ground offensive with little to no civilian casualties, except for the ones who stood behind. So that is it for the Gaza area. As for the northern front with Lebanon and the Hezbollah groupings here in the north, there's increased tension between Israel and those groups as there's mutual shelling across the border, which we see in this video here, which shows the heightened tensions in the north. In relation to this, there's also some rumors that Iran was planning on participating in this war, supporting Hamas. These rumors, I don't know where they come from, but in response to these rumors, Israel has struck airfields in Syria, both in Aleppo and in Damascus. So with this, the Syrians essentially have no major airfields to transport military stuff, and this is most likely a preemptive strike to prevent any idea or possibility of the Iranians using Syrian airfields to conduct operations within Israel. But this is of course an unprovoked attack on Syrian territory, as the Syrians have yet to do anything. The reason they believe this to be true is because Syria and Iran are strategic allies, as Iran has helped Syria a lot in the civil war that happened there in that country. And while this is happening, the Palestinians continue their drone strikes, as we can see in this video here, from the West Bank, and missile strikes, as we can see here the results of those in Ashkelon. So we're seeing a lot of missile strikes, but also in the direction of Tel Aviv from the Gaza side. So the Palestinians are constantly bombarding Israel with rockets, while the Israelis are airstriking and launching incendiary munitions against Palestine. Due to the intensity of the airstrikes by the Israeli forces on Gaza, they are quickly running low on munitions. Therefore, they asked the United States for resupply, and the first United States airplane landed in Tel Aviv with supplies for the Israeli Air Force and for their air defense systems, the Iron Dome. With the ongoing conflict, there's an increasing amount of tensions in the West Bank, as well as there's mass protests across the West Bank, but there's no armed uprising so far. We are seeing a few drones from Al-Qassam brigades, which are essentially completely gone, but there's still some small parts of it left, which are the ones launching the kamikaze drones. But other than that, we are seeing almost nothing left of those brigades, and as such we are seeing only some mass protests, not any armed uprisings so far. So what is the Israeli purpose with the ground assault into Gaza? We have to ask this question to see why they are motivated to do it and why the United States is advising them not to. The reason why they want to do this is to quote-unquote get rid of the Gaza problem once and for all, or clearing it off the face of the earth, as the Israeli defense minister has said. So the reason for this is essentially to get rid of the Gaza problem, which is by eliminating Gaza. So why haven't they done so yet? That is because of the human costs involved would be astronomical. We are already seeing UN experts talking about this conflict. They claim that the Israeli destruction in Gaza amounts to collective punishment, and I quote, "There is no justifications for violence that is indiscriminate and directed at innocent civilians, whether by Hamas or Israeli forces. This is absolutely prohibited by international law and amounts to a war crime," the UN expert group said in a statement. They also include and condemn the horrific crimes committed by Hamas, but noted that Israel had resorted to indiscriminate attacks on an already depleted Palestinian population living under an illegal siege for 16 years and having already endured 5 brutal wars. End quote. So this is why we are seeing the United States discourage Israel from launching this ground offensive, but they are committed to doing it nonetheless. The reason for this is that Egypt has finally caved in and opened the Rafah crossing, and as such Palestinian civilians are now crossing over to the country. If the Palestinian civilians leave, then there is nothing holding them back from completely destroying Gaza. The issue here lies that there's also heightened tensions in the surrounding countries. Both Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, which Saudi Arabia specifically has been calling, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has been calling Turkey and Iran, trying to work together with these countries they historically have considered their opponents and adversaries. They have talked with these countries to come with collective statements to discourage Israel from continuing this war, asking them to end it. In the meantime, Jordan is blocking the border between the West Bank and Jordan to try and prevent armed civilians from Jordan to cross over into the West Bank of Palestine and try to fight the Israelis there. So there's heightened tensions, heavy demonstrations in Muslim countries surrounding Israel, trying to get their governments to intervene in the war and trying to participate in the war. All of this combined risks a major regional war, and with the Israeli airstrikes in the Syrian airfields, there's even more heightened tensions. To divert all of this tension, the United States have not just sent one aircraft carrier, but is now talking about sending a second aircraft carrier over to Israel to prevent any other countries from getting involved by being there as a deterrence to other countries. So in total, we need this war to end as quickly as possible, to end the civilian suffering, and generally to avoid a major regional war, which could include essentially the whole Middle East in one combined war, where the sides are just flying everywhere. The whole politics situation is a complete mess already. We don't need a major war between the United States and all of these Middle Eastern countries. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching, and have a great